Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm here with Jordan Mealey. Jordan, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Jordan Mealey over here from New Jersey, born and raised. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of New Jersey, and also a certified supervised counselor as well.
Awesome. And you are the clinic director of which location in New Jersey?
In New Jersey, clinic director of Mealey Mental Health Central New Jersey. So that includes Flemington, Somerville, and soon to be Skillman, New Jersey. So we have a nice little triangle of, I guess, territory, if you want to say, in Central New Jersey for us.
Yeah. So are you the clinic director of all three?
Got it. It's me.
That's amazing.
It's me. And yeah, I am, oh my gosh, infinitely grateful to be able to be a part of the Mealey family in general as a whole. And then just having the local impact on the communities to be able to build with already a growing local New Jersey family of Mealey therapists that are just outstanding individuals to be able to help more of our people wherever we can.
I love that. So how many therapists are you currently supervising?
Right now, supervising 2 for their license hours. And then in general, at the 2 locations we have open so far, there's 11 full-time therapists that we have.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. That's so cool.
Yeah,
so I have been, that's awesome. I love that. I have been wanting to have Jordan on here for so long. Jordan is the person who I have pulled you into different videos and all sorts of different things, and you are so enthusiastic and just infectious to be around. And so I think every single person who knows you would agree. And so I'm just so excited to have you on here to talk more about something that you're really passionate about, working with people who are going through grief and loss.
Yes. Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, let's just jump into the conversation. I think that this is a really important, I was thinking about this morning, where this is one of those topics where as a therapist, you might not specialize in this. You might not be like, I don't specialize in grief and loss, that's someone else's deal. But chances are you're going to have a client that is dealing with grief and loss. So you need to have the tools. And so it's kind of there's not a ton of topics out there where it's like, you might not specialize or have any interest in working with this population, but it's going to happen anyways at some point.
Yes,
unfortunately.
Exactly.
So tell me about what drew you to this topic and what drew you to this specialization?
Sure. It started personal for me, as I think probably many different specialties and focus areas do for therapists, or why we become therapists to begin with. That I have just been very fortunate to be born into and grow up with a very unwavering, unconditionally loving family on both sides, mom and dad's. My parents divorced when I was little, very little. So, there were 2 different Christmases. There were 2 different Thanksgivings. There were, so many family dinners. But it was great. I don't know if I'd change. I don't even know if I'd change it and go back to have my parents still together because they've just grown so differently. And it's given me such a different perspective on life because they are just 2 very different people. So growing up, especially on my dad's side of the family, longevity thankfully, we have longevity that's really strong there. So I got to grow up with 4 great aunts, my grandmother, great uncles, and cousins from first to fourth cousin removed or whatever it is. And just so many traditions throughout the year from that side of the family that we had growing up. So up and through my 20s, I still had 3 grandparents and all of my great aunts, each of them living until their late 80s or 90s. And it was just amazing. So I was born in a small town in New Jersey. Many people think New Jersey and they think Jersey Shore and Snooki and the hair poofs. just no. There's one area of New Jersey that's like that, I guess. I won't say what one, but the area I'm from is just farmland. Farmland, a lot of greenery, lakes. So growing up, that whole side of my dad's family basically all also grew up in that county. So it was cool. I mean, many of them lived in the same town. So we would see like multiple different family members in one weekend because everybody was just right there. So I just learned so many beautiful morals and values of what it is to be a selfless person and loyal and loving. So when, of course, as life happens, right, people are going to die. And when that started happening, where we started losing that generation of my great aunts and uncles and my grandparents, I think it's also a sad yet normal process that traditions then start being lost and or they change because the people that were rooted in them and that were giving them to us and making sure we were following through with them aren't there anymore. And I think a lot in our culture of American culture now, at least maybe on the East Coast and in this tri-state area, families don't, especially extended families, aren't typically staying in the same town with each other. There's this one's moving off to California, this one's going to North Carolina for college, and then they're staying down there for a job. And just that very close-knit community of family in one area, I don't see as a norm much anymore. And I know our family lost it when that generation started to die. So when my grandmother, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and that was about 2013, 2014. She had been a nurse for 44 years in the same town I grew up in. She went into hospice about her last 6 months to a year of life in the same town. And the hospice team were just unbelievable for us and for her. And so, I'd be there pretty much every day, driving to and from college to go and visit her while she was there. And not when we weren't there, there was like this peace over me of this team of people that is working there are treating her just as well as what we would do if we were there. She died peacefully at hospice in 2015, right in the beginning of 2015. And after that, I was like, and some people are like, that's kind of weird. But I'm like, I'm very comfortable with death and with that transition of what life looks like for people after losing somebody. And I think that's kind of where I want to continue to get more competent and focus in is just how to help people live through it and grow through that because it's inevitable. And there is over, now in my background of grief training, there's over 40 different kinds of losses that each one of us will go through at least one in our life, but there's over 40. And I just wanted to be able to help as Ellie does with mental health in general, but start really focusing in and helping my local community or communities on normalizing and talking about loss because it happens. And we're so ill-equipped to feel it and how to experience it and heal through it because of that lack of conversation about it and the taboo of like, oh, don't bring that up because they're hurting. Well, bring it up because they're hurting. Why wouldn't you bring it up then to offer the support? And even if it's just silent support. So that's like the long spiel of it. For me is just personally of seeing the care my grandmother had gotten. And I also work per diem now for hospice in my town. And it's one of my favorite parts of the week is being with the group of people that I get to just help and support and listen to at the hospice group too.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. I'm so curious about the different types of grief that you're talking about. Like, tell me more about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 40 different reasons for grieving, or 40 different kinds of losses. So, loss by death, of course, like we're talking about, divorce, so loss of a partner. And then, I mean, we can go on from that one, even just divorce, and how then there's secondary losses from that. So loss of the family unit. So having to grieve what the family unit looked like while you were married, and now what is the family unit looking like now that you're separated and or divorced. Loss of a house typically comes along with that too, or loss of an apartment, whatever, that, because one person at least is moving, maybe both are moving or can't afford it. Also then goes into loss of lifestyle. Maybe you're going from two incomes, now you're going to one. And that loss of a lifestyle of what may have been very easy to be able to be a part of and pay for is now very different, and you need to budget differently. And maybe you're not going to get your nails done every 3 weeks. Now you're doing your own at home to save a little bit more money. Loss of, and then there's, the intangible losses too. So loss of trust, especially for maybe victims of abuse or victims of a type of trauma. So loss of trust, loss of security. There can be loss of finances. Again, like maybe someone loses their job, and now you're loss of this career identity and loss of finances. And then a big one that kind of goes along with most of them, that's very common for people if they identify with spiritual or religious beliefs, is loss of faith while they're going through some other type of loss. Like, oh, how come God or my higher power would do this to me, or would allow this to happen to me? Why do I deserve this? Many different reasons why someone can be grieving.
Why do you think it's so hard to talk about grief and loss? I mean, you mentioned before it is kind of this taboo subject, and I don't know if it's just because people are afraid to kind of face their own mortality, or
Mm,
like why do you think it feels like such a hard topic for people, even
mm.
therapists?
True. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I believe that so they talk about, so I was trained, it's a wonderful group of people at the Grief Recovery Institute. It's based out in Oregon. They've been around now. I believe the two founders began in the 70s, building this method of the grief recovery method, which is now the only evidence-based grief and loss method. And it's not a therapeutic intervention originally. It is more this educational program and intervention that just any person can read into and teach themselves as well, but they offer the group programs. But it's the only evidence-based one internationally, which is awesome. So with that, I think that we've just been, my opinion is that we've been socialized to believe that the feelings around grief and loss are abnormal and unnatural. That, whether you have this loss from the death of a loved one, or sometimes a less than loved one, or the loss of a career, or the end of a relationship, that we've gotten to a point that, or we grew to this place that there were these myths that generations of our families or people we grew up around kind of solidified, of like, grieve by yourself. Like, you go into a bathroom to cry, or you go in your room and do it there. You have to be strong for other people. So, if you're going to grieve, grieve alone, because you need to be strong. Like your mom needs you, or your sibling needs you. And that may look like bury your feelings, just keep moving on, get busy. Time will heal it. And one of the best analogies and visuals that I like to use with my clients and with my groups is, because the time heals all wounds. One, with grief, we throw that out the window. That's just done. that one doesn't sit well with any griever, really. So I take the black ball in a box analogy. So if you have a black ball that it fits perfectly, and every side of the box gets hit with this black ball, that is the beginning of grief. So when you first experience the loss, that ball is in this box and the ball can't move because it's just jam packed in there. As time goes on, the box, which we symbolize as life, the box will expand in both directions. The ball will never lessen. The ball will never go away. We won't forget our loss. We will learn how to live around it. And that expansion is different for everyone. So, I have people that will say, like, wow, 6 months since my loved one died. And I can't believe like how much I've coped through at this point, and like where I am now versus where I was in those first couple of weeks. Then I have someone that is now a year and a half later from losing their partner, and it's now hitting them. The real devastation of that loss and what changes have come from it since is now hitting them because of it could even just be because of financial things that are now rising that just weren't there before, or selling a home, or now the water heater broke in the house a year and a half later, and my partner used to be the one to handle all of that and fix it, and now that triggers them and brings it up again, like, they're not here, and how do I do this? They always took care of this.
No, I totally can visualize or can see that. I love that visualization of the box and the ball. I think that that's such a good way to show that life does expand around it. Why do you use the word expand? Like, do you mean because I like that choice of word, and was
Thanks.
that intentional?
It really wasn't. No.
I like that. No, it's good.
It wasn't, but I just kind of pictured, like as you go, and one of the biggest things for my grief bereavement group people is that many topics, many of our conversations come back to the topic of what do I fill my time with now? Or like we used to like to do this together, because this group in particular is for loss of a loved one by death. And we used to golf together. We used to play tennis, and now they may go back to those hobbies later, and that would be great. And that's okay. They might not want to go back to those. Yeah. At least right now, they don't want to go back to those. So then we say, okay, well, what else is going on in our town or in your area? And like, we'll bring in different activities and pamphlets for each other to share of, is there something you've always wanted to try maybe that you haven't? Or what are other people doing, and sharing those ideas? So I guess I use the word expand because as we can start putting in and not replacing, as we can start putting in new or different activities or new or different routines to our life, you're just flexing kind of that, you're flexing the muscle to just grow larger around where this, and making this callus around this hurt. Where again, it's there. You're not going to forget. And many people are fearful of coming in, especially individual counseling for grief and loss, or the group. Many times I hear that they delayed coming because they were worried that they were going to learn how to forget of the person. And that is not the intention at all. That person is one of your people, where that loss is a part of your life that has brought you to this point to an extent, and is also getting you somewhere else. We just don't know. We just can't see that yet. So the intention is absolutely not to forget, but again, just how to cope through and be able to accept that the loss happened, and where do you go from there now? What is where is your meaning now?
Yeah. So as a therapist who is working with this population, if you have somebody that comes in wanting to, like maybe they lost a partner or they lost a loved one, what sort of like, what does treatment look like with them? Because it's different. You're not treating anxiety. You're not trying to cure them of their depression, but it's,
Right.
so how do you approach working with people in this scenario?
I mean, I really heavily lean into the grief recovery method. So, of course, you take some of my clinical skills of the lovely active listening and empathic understanding and all of that good stuff. But it's not it's not. It's this person is hurting, and this person is scared about what does this look like. Like I said, I don't want to forget, right? And sometimes they'll say, I've tried therapy before for this and it didn't help. But then I talk to them about first that grievers grieve at 100%. And every griever grieves differently. So they'll come in a lot of times with these preconceived notions of what they should look like at the point that they are at now, or what someone else has told them that they should look like, or this and that. So I tell them, like, this is not a place. Grievers are not broken, right? We're not trying to fix something that's broken. We're working on healing a piece of them, from an intellectual standpoint of, okay, physically, this person's life has now ended, to an emotional place that we're working with our heart and not with our head. So what works for you to grieve instead of what's wrong with me because I'm still grieving is kind of my attitude, to have to like get them to hear first that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're grieving. And it's a very normal and natural reaction to a loss.
So it's kind of like providing some of that normalization and reframing a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the grief recovery method, or like is that part of the method that you're talking about, or what?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about it. I'm interested.
Yep. So absolutely part of the method. So there were the two founding gentlemen, John James and Russell Friedman. Again, not to quote me, and I should know this by now, but I believe they merged, they came together and found each other in the 70s. One was going through and grieving the loss from divorce. One was grieving the loss from a death. And, as there are many still now, they had said that this idea of trying to find something that was more person oriented, or like for us therapists, person centered, was more of they were finding that there were so many self-help books and talks and things like that, to hear someone else's way of grieving and how it's worked for them or how it hasn't, instead of, well, where am I? Where is the person myself? And yeah, that could have worked for you. Maybe it could help me, but it isn't necessarily going to help me. And how to be able to create this very unique, personal and individualized way to find out, where are the incomplete emotional communications that we have with this loved one or toward this loss. And when I say incomplete communication, we go into kind of unresolved grief. So in the method, you get to a point, it's usually an 8 to 10 week treatment, either individually or for the group. And you get to a point where you're looking at what are these undelivered emotional communications that are holding pain in me that I haven't been able to give to the loved one that died, or I wanted to, and I just it didn't even come into my mind until they were gone already. We say unmet expectations of, I expected us to be together into our 90s, or unfulfilled wishes. Like, I wish that we got to take that 50th anniversary trip to Hawaii. So there's, this part of the unresolved grief that we really dig deeply into with people, about 5 to 6 sessions in, where we're looking at the undelivered emotional communications that's holding that pain in for them. I don't know if that even answered your question, but I just love everything about this, where I'm like, I want to say everything I can about it.
No, that absolutely answered my question. So how do you know, this is going to sound like a silly question, but like you said 8 to 10 sessions or 8 to 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't imagine that at the end of that, the person is like, I'm good. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so how
Sure.
would you describe progress if somebody is
Sure.
kind of like learning how to grieve or making meaning of this? How would you
Yeah.
kind of like even set up a treatment plan around it?
Mm-hmm. It is tricky because healing and the grieving process is not linear. We know that for general pieces. Um, so I we as a therapist outside of grief recovery method, as a therapist, my vision is, I go at their pace, right? I'm going to meet them with where they're at. So yes, we'll say that there is these 8 weeks for individual, 8 to 10 weeks for group program material or individual material to be able to talk about and learn through together for themselves. However, I mean, since beginning with Ellie and using the method in practice, most of I have a couple of people that are still with me from the beginning of last summer, and again, we've gone through the method, if you want to say that. However, we continuously, either in between their sessions when they were going through the method and after now that they're done one of them, we continuously go back and talk about it. We continuously go back and explore and process other underlying feelings that are arising up that we can make connection to from that loss or from where that grief still sits for them. So I mean, I say eight for an individual, but it's typically at least to actually finish the individual program in practice. It's like 12 to 14 weeks because I won't, if they come in with something one week that we're just not going to get to where it is, that's okay. We'll get to it next time. I'll just review where we're at. And the grief recovery method itself does have a heavy homework component. And the homework is very emotionally revealing. So when I give them their assignments, I also make sure that they know that prior to their next session, if that assignment brings up something for them, that they can call me, or making sure that when they do the assignment that they pick a very safe, comfortable, private space to be able to sit for themselves and just feel and be in it, and take breaks when they need to as well.
What are some of the assignments that someone might do through this method?
Ooh, all right. Well, we'll give you a big one. So, one of the largest assignments that they have is creating something called a loss history graph. So, in the beginning, I have them before they even commit. Let's say, even if we already know who they're going to do it on, or the loss they know they're going to do the whole program on, they have to do a loss history graph. So this challenge not challenges but gets me into a place where it is a very different role as a therapist and then as a grief recovery specialist where this collides, because when the homework starts, the loss history graph being the first big one, I share my own loss history graph with my client first before they do this assignment. So they get to learn, and of course, I give them a different version than maybe my whole kit and caboodle. Um, but they learn about very significant losses and changes that happened in my life before I ask them to do it themselves, because I want to create that very authentic and healthily vulnerable place with them to see that I'm sharing with you too, like I'm confiding in with you very personal changes from my life. And again, just to hopefully get them to feel more comfortable that, okay, well, she shared it and she trusts in me to do this. So I hope that it gives them a little ease to do the same with me. But so they go from what we call dawn of conscious memory. So at first they put in their date of birth on one end of the line, date of today to the other end. then the first thing that we want them to put on the loss history graph is their dawn of conscious memory, which is what do you believe or what can you recall is your earliest visual memory that you have, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be something related to loss. It can be, I was playing in the park with a red ball with my sister. So they put that down. And then from there, from that dawn of conscious memory, what are the other losses? So, and these can be, we don't want them to bedevil any certain person and or only focus on hurtful, painful losses, but also look at some losses and change, right? That may have also been, yes, bittersweet, like it was painful and it also helped me grow, or like almost like I tell them when I graduated college, proud loss that now that part of my life is over and I'm going to miss like the people and the community, but also a proud loss because now I've achieved something from that. So they do things above and below the loss history graph line, but it brings out a lot of memories at times for people. And then even from that loss history graph, we start, there are other components that we dig deeper into each of those losses in the next few weeks after that of, are there any apologies that you would want to state to any person that was on your loss graph? Are there any forgivenesses that you would want to state for any of the losses that are on there? Are there any significant emotional statements that you want to say toward any losses that are on there? And we go through those 3 recovery components as well with the loss graph. It's one of the very intense homework assignments that they have.
That sounds, it sounds similar to narrative exposure therapy and like the initial kind of roadmap that you're making with that. But what about if somebody goes through a loss before they remember, like it was like an adoption loss or a loss of a caregiver or like loss of something before that first memory? Can you still work on this method with people who maybe don't, like the loss has a profound impact on their life, but they don't remember it?
I believe that I haven't yet directly myself. That what comes up for me to answer would be yes, because it would fall into, I would say, more of the categories of the intangible losses, right? Yeah. Because you didn't physically be with that person or see that thing, remember that thing happening. However, what are kind of the ripple effects from that now that you go back to with that? So looking at, again, secondary losses from it that the person perceives happen because of that. And also those it's that unresolved grief too of, well, here's some unmet expectations or wishes or dreams that I have if, my father didn't die at that time. Like, what would our life look like together now? Or I wish I went to a baseball game with him because I heard he really liked the Mets. I had to put the Mets in there. So yeah, I think you absolutely can do the method with that because, you're also kind of like, you're growing through life, but there's a piece that you may not have been able yet to move on from. So it's like finding that kind of peace and acceptance piece of how to be able to feel complete with that loss, to be able to continue to grow from it, because there's so much that can be incomplete from our losses. And again, that that we're in our society, we're more prone to hearing like, oh, just let that go, or you have to move away from that. And I get it. One of the things that we talk about too with the grievers is how many unhelpful things that people around us say that they want to be helpful saying, but that are so, so truly unhelpful, which unfortunately just shows more of a reason or more of the example as to how ill-equipped we are as a society to handle grief. Of like, One of my group's favorites is when they hear two ones, and I have a group of pretty religious people that are in there. But one of the things they hate to hear the most is God only gives you as much as you can handle, so you must be able to get through this. And they're like, "No, my God wouldn't do this to me, or my higher power." So that one is one of the most common that I hear. The other most common, especially when you lose a partner or a spouse, significant other, is, well, thankfully, there are other people that are out there. There's other fish in the sea, and you're going to find a person again. Well, okay, maybe I want to believe that later. However, my
Fringe.
person is not out in the sea swimming anymore. And no
Yeah.
one is going to replace that person. So they're like, I don't want to hear that either. I'm like, I know. I know. And through the method, we learned that there is around 119 common phrases that people will say to a griever to try to be comforting and helpful that are actually not helpful at all. 119.
Oh, I believe it. And I'm sure that I've said things like that in the past too, right?
Same. Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
oh man,
Yep. Because you just want people to feel better. Like you just,
yes.
and I mean, and with grief and loss, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're not there. You can't fix it, and you can't fix many things in our relationships. You just have to learn how to adapt and build around it, in whatever way that looks like, right? To be able to figure out what works best for you and how to, some days, just how to survive, just how to get yourself up out of bed and eat, maybe take a shower, and some days some days it's okay to just have your day look like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about if you are a therapist like me who doesn't necessarily specialize in this? You're
Yeah.
seeing clients who maybe just they show up to session one day and they're like, I just had this monumental loss.
Mm.
Um, is that I guess one of the things selfishly, I'm thinking in my mind, like, would I go out and get trained in grief recovery? Would I
Right.
like, what would I mean, that might be a little bit too soon right then, like, um, but like, if you are a therapist who is maybe you specialize in something else and you are, unexpectedly now walking through this with a client, what advice would you give for a therapist like me in that scenario where, what could we do or to help them maybe in that moment and then even just,
Yeah.
like walk alongside them?
Yeah. Well, I love that, walking alongside them for sure, right? We want to just kind of be that shoulder to lean on as any of our clients need it, and we need it too sometimes. Um, I wish I could take credit for this, and I will not. But the grief recovery method again trains us to be the visual of a heart with ears. So that's where I would start, of telling a therapist that may not feel comfortable or doesn't necessarily focus often on grief and loss, is just picture yourself as a heart with ears. And you can say that to the client if you'd like to, or that's just what you're going to embrace and be. Um, and just recognizing that grief is normal and natural, and just reminding them of that, or teaching them that it is, it's not about something wrong with you. It's about what you're feeling. And that each griever grieves differently. Every relationship that each one of us has is unique. So the loss and just a sidebar, the loss of, let's say, when the day comes, the loss of one of my parents, my grief for them will be different and will look differently for me than my brother's grief for them. And even though we were raised in the same house by the same people, and have many of the same memories, my relationship with that parent is different than his relationship with that parent. So the grieving will be different to an extent. So I just tell people, or would say more to the therapist, listen with your heart, not with our head. It is more emotional than intellectual. And just being able to allow them to feel, as corny as that is, feel their feelings, and share with what they are without us giving any unsolicited advice, or analyzing it or judging it, which I know no therapist would do. But just remembering that their process is unique, and where however they are grieving, that's the way they're grieving. It's not right or wrong. That's the way that it is for them. And then how to just sit with them and allow them to have that space to feel it.
Yeah. What sort of questions would you like? I guess I'm just imagining. I haven't been in this scenario yet, but I'm imagining a client comes in, says, "I lost my mom this week. She sits on my
Mm.
couch," and so then like, would it be appropriate for me to ask, like, what happened? Like, do you want to talk about what happened? Do you want to talk, like,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about her? Like, I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
would I, yeah, some of that probably depends on the client, right? And if you
Absolutely,
knew
sure.
much about
Mm-hmm.
that parent,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
um, what sort of questions or like how soon would I ask some of that stuff, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question to ask, because you want to. I think that maybe as a therapist, like our initial like urge or reaction is to just like, how do I support the best right now?
Mhm. Mhm.
How do I get this person to, and there's a point too, you're like, is this person going to be safe when they leave my office because they're hurting
Sure.
so badly?
Yeah.
But it's really like, how can I get them to feel better now? I know for me, and this happened to me early as a baby therapist, and and it still happens to me most days now, where I'm like, what am I doing to help this person? Like
Uh-huh.
how, like some days, some people walk out and I'm like, what did I just do? Like, why did they come to talk to me? Because
Mhm.
I don't think anything professional just happened. I have no idea what's happening. And that imposter syndrome, which just, it's always going to be there.
Mhm.
It's like that rain cloud that follows you in the back. And sometimes it spits on you and sometimes it doesn't. Um, but I would say, and recommend that first, you, again, heart with ears, right? So you just prioritize sitting in that space with them. They came to you. So thankfully, that's an example that they trust you and that you're also a comfortable person to be around during, I mean, loss of a mother or parent for many people, not all, but for many people, poof, that's we don't compare losses either. So that's a large one, but there's so many other things can be large ones. But just being with them and just saying, I'm sorry. What can I do to support you? How can I be there for you right now while you grieve? And people's answers are going to be different to that. I think the what happened part, because again, that one, what happened question, I think leans us more into the intellectual side. Like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
logically, I need to know, was there a medical thing? Was this an accident? Because then you're going to intellectualize it to give
Mm.
feedback intellectually instead of going with how can I support you, or what kind of role can I have with you right now while you're grieving. Sits emotionally with them first.
Mm.
And that's where they're ready for. That's what they need, is to just know where I'm at is normal for me.
Yeah. Oh, bingo. This has been so good, Jordan. Oh my gosh.
Love
We are
it.
I know. We we are running out of time, but thank you so much for joining and sharing
Thank
so much
you.
good information. I have learned so much from you, and I'm excited to jump into and learn more about grief recovery method. That was a brand new field
Wonderful.
for me. And so yeah, I love that. I think there's so many good takeaways from this episode, and I just really appreciate your time and
Oh,
sharing.
I am very grateful to be here. And thank
Oh,
you,
good.
Miranda, because I continue to listen to the podcast. It gives me so many great ideas and laughs, and, to know that, uh, we have each other, right? Us therapists
Absolutely.
have each other, and we're not alone either.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.